Okay, welcome. We're going to jump right in here. This is an update on the tariffs that were announced yesterday. So we want to run through a little bit of that and some more details on what you can do. As an intro, I'm Tom Taggart. I head up the global trade team here at Passport, and that is all things compliance, customs, tax, and product compliance. And I'm fortunate to have Augustine join us today. He has some great industry background that he's going to tell you about as well. For my part, spent about 6 years in DC and the policy side of things, working for the U.S. Senate and State Department and Foreign Service, and spent almost 20 years now in international shipping, everything from ocean shipping with Maersk to integrators like UPS and now Passport. So I'll turn it over to Augustine for a quick intro.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Tom, and hi, everyone. Augustine Farias here, and I'm happy to be part of the team. I just joined Passport Global about a month ago to be part of Tom's organization, helping with trade and strategy. Similar to Tom, I have over 20 years of experience in global e-commerce, both on the supplier side. I spent time at DHL, as well as on platforms like eBay and Walmart.com. And then most recently, I spent the last 6 years at a D2C sustainable brand named Everlane, where I was leading the international expansion as well as the logistics and distribution. So I can relate to many of you who are operating different brands and trying to find out what to do with what we heard yesterday over the last couple of months, because I went through that as well during the first Trump administration when the 301 tariffs were implemented. And obviously, we're here to help and navigate what we hear. So that's me, Tom. You want to kick us off? Back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And really happy to have your insight here. We're going to give some updates on what happened yesterday. And this is still very much a fluid situation. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on everything to date. All that is available online at our Trump Trade site. We'll give you the trumptradetracker.com. But what's, I think, more important is we've heard a lot of different views of what e-commerce brands and 3PLs can do, and some of it's good advice, and some of it I don't think is all that relevant to e-commerce brands. So glad to have your personal expertise here, being that you have gone through this and can offer some insight into what works and what really isn't all that relevant for brands.
Yeah, thank you for sure.
All right. So yesterday was a busy day, a long time coming. We had heard about the Liberation Day announcements for some time, and they were a range of tariffs, 10% across the board on all countries, effective on April 5th. Unless there are specific tariffs, the individualized reciprocal tariffs, as they're being called, that are impacting about 60 of our key trading partners. So it's really either or, the 10% or this other range from 20% all the way up to about 49% that we're seeing for the individual reciprocal tariffs. They can change on a moment's notice. So we do expect a lot of flux here in the individualized reciprocal tariffs. And we'll work to keep you up to date on what that means. Some products are excluded, not really all that relevant to e-com brands, mostly on the manufacturing side with materials and minerals and pharmaceuticals and even some energy products. But there, we'll give you a link to what those excluded products are. Canada and Mexico has been interesting. There was earlier in the year an announcement of a 25% tariff on goods from Canada or Mexico, but that was really stayed because anything that qualifies for USMCA, which is anything really made in Canada or Mexico, is exempted for the time from this 25% tariff. So really no change to Canada or Mexico as of today. De minimis is still, that's the big question, is what's going on with de minimis. Aside from Canada or China and Hong Kong, de minimis is still available to imports from any country other than China and Hong Kong until adequate systems are in place, as the quote says here, to collect the duties. We did see for that 3-day period where de minimis went away, quite a struggle to process shipments, 4 million packages a day coming in that had to be cleared in a different method, and a real struggle to collect duties on those. So we do expect at some point de minimis is going to go away for all countries. And that date has not quite been announced. It could be months away. It could be many months away. Let's look at what happened with China, because that is the interesting one here. And China was definitely singled out, largely still on the fentanyl and opioid basis. But what we saw that was very interesting is that they did announce that systems were in place to collect duties from goods that are of China or Hong Kong origin, meaning that de minimis is no longer available. Any products, regardless of where they're shipped from, if they're made and sourced from China or Hong Kong, they can no longer go through the Section 321, Type 86, de minimis entry, and no longer available for goods under 800. Goods of any value are going to have to go through some sort of formal or informal clearance process, and duties will be assessed on those products. We did see a fairly significant 34% reciprocal tariff applied to China and Hong Kong. And the key thing here, we'll give you an example in a second, is that these are stacking, meaning that they all add up. The 34% that was announced yesterday and goes into effect this week is combined with the prior 20% that was announced earlier in the year, and that is combined with the up to 25% that was announced in 2018. So this can be very significant for anything that is sourced from China or Hong Kong. Now, postal used to be the way around many of these tariffs, but that loophole has also been closed. So we're seeing that postal shipments are going to be assessed either 30% of the value for a tariff or 25% or $25 per item in the box. And that number increases to $50 per item that's actually in that package, coming up in June 1st. So it's still some things to sort out here of how that will actually be implemented. But the way it is structured today, the carrier, the transportation provider in China or Hong Kong selects whether they want to account for the 30% tariff on the value of the goods or this 25% per item. And it is up to the carrier to collect it and remit it. So definitely some details to be worked out there. The one interesting thing is that the postal tariffs are not stacking. So it's going to be either or. It's going to be the 30% or the 25 per item, or that's the two options there. There are no additional tariffs. So it'll be in lieu of any other tariffs like the 34% that you see in the line above that, or any prior duties and fees that were implemented. So postal's been interesting. We'll keep an eye on that and update you as that unfolds and we get some more details on how this will actually be implemented. Okay, quick example of what the stacking tariff means. I think this is very significant. We saw that if you take eye makeup or eyeliner, for example, in 2017, it's duty-free. And even today, if you look up the harmonized tariff schedule, the HTS US, it still shows as duty-free. However, in 2018, there was a Section 301 tariff, as it was called, 25% that was applied to this commodity. And earlier this year, a 10%, then an additional 10% for a total of 20% additional tariff. And then on top of that, just yesterday, the 34% tariff, and all those add up. So you went from 0% duty in 2017 to 79% duty for this one item in today. So very much an impact, and important to understand what your commodity classifications are, your HS codes, so that we can estimate the impact that this will have to your products. All right, a lot of detail here. There's a link to this full list to give you a better sense, but these are the reciprocal tariffs that were implemented by country. If a country is not on this list, it's going to be the flat 10% baseline tariff that applies. But there are some interesting ones that they're on this list that were singled out. 20% for goods from the European Union, for example, and all the way up to about 49% for Cambodia. So can be very significant for brands that are looking to source from other locations outside of China. In the Go South policy of moving production and sourcing to Vietnam or others is less attractive now. Vietnam has a 46% reciprocal tariff. So definitely leads to some conversations about where is best to source your products. But here's the full list of the reciprocal tariffs and how they will apply. All right, so to get into the meat of it, we really want to focus on this part here. As we're mentioning, this is a lot of advice out there of what you can do, and some is very relevant, some is easy to implement, and some is extremely difficult and a long slog to implement. So I want to rely on Augustine here to walk through his experience and executing many of these very things, and how we see this playing out, and what you can do as an e-commerce merchant or 3PL.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. For sure, yeah. So as Tom mentioned, it's obviously what we have here is a list of non-exhaustive recommendations or things that you, as you manage your operations and decide how to tackle these changes in the next couple of months and even years. Some of them are very easy said, but complex to implement. And we can maybe start from the top here. The obvious one, although of course no one wants to see prices increase, but will be to look at how do you apply some of these tariffs and include them into your prices, right? If you are importing products from some of those countries that are heavily impacted, you can decide to incorporate that additional duty rate into your product cost, your COGS, and then manage your margin that way, which will then mean that you'll have to increase your retail price. If you are exporting, and this is something that is going to be developing over the next days or months, when we see the reciprocal tariff that some of the other countries are going to implement against the US, then there's a question about how do you manage those increased duty rates on your website. Either you add the additional duty into your product price in your PDP, or you separate and break out the additional duty during checkout for that customer to see. And there could be different ways you can do this, even by mentioning that this is the additional tariff that was implemented or not. This obviously may have impact in your conversion. So you have to be very careful on how you implement these things. And of course, as I said, no one likes to see prices increase, but as you know your business and manage your margins, this is obviously something that you need to consider very carefully. The second one, I think Tom alluded to, as we see the de minimis program go away, initially for China and Hong Kong, and then potentially for other origin countries. It's still yet to be determined by CBP if there are going to be changes to the current, it's called Type 86, which is the entry that Section 321, the minimum under $800 orders come through, are going to be done in terms of adding more information, like the HTS code or the manufacturer ID, or you'll have to, and which is what we're proposing here, consolidate all those orders. Like for instance, right now, knowing that China and Hong Kong will be excluded, you may need to, if you have a mix of origins from other markets that are still eligible for the program, you may need to then build some logic that will separate only those orders that have items from China and Hong Kong, and then group them together into one single manifest and clear them formally under what's called now Type 01. Granted, you'll have to pay those heavy, high tariffs that Tom just mentioned, but at least it's only on those products. And then as you consolidate, you may be able to lower your brokerage cost because it will be just one entry for all those e-commerce orders from China origin versus multiple entries for each individual e-commerce order. So that's a strategy that you can think of as we navigate the changes on the de minimis and Section 321. The third one is a complex one, and we want to make a disclosure here that we suggest that you work with your broker as well as with if you have any trade consultant or advisor on if you can use what's called first sale valuation for your imports into the US. There's still a lot of debate about this, and maybe this obviously has sparked quite a bit of conversation in terms of the requirements. So you need to be careful on when the actual transfer of title is taking place in the transaction between your merchant or your factory in China or overseas. It has to be properly declared as a sale for export, and then it has to be considered an arm's length transaction between two unrelated parties. So again, I don't consider myself an expert in this area. That's why I believe that this may be a powerful tool. It's been used in the past in different industries, and you may want to consider this option as you evaluate the best way to minimize the impact. Again, this is important because as you use first sale valuation, you can lower the duty. Although the duty rate will be the same, you lower the value for duty on which that amount is that percent is applied by declaring at cost of goods or at a wholesale price that it's agreed between the buyer and the seller, instead of at the retail value that your consumer is purchasing the order online as you move the product from your 3PL warehouse, either overseas in Asia or in Canada and Mexico. So
Yeah,
those are three. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we had some good questions coming in the chat, and please feel free to add some more. I did want to press down on one here, and that is de minimis going away? Is that going to impact drop shipping from China and Hong Kong? And I think it really depends on a couple things, whether there is another way to clear goods other than just a formal entry. But if assuming that that's not available and we do have to use the existing formal or informal entry structure, then it does make it more challenging, because the first sale is really the best way to set that up. As Augustine was saying, there's a whole lot to that. But if you're able to structure it in a way where the contracts are in place and the documentation can stand up to an audit, then that is a way to for you to consolidate all your goods into a single entry with you as the importer, either as a U.S. business that is established, being the importer of record, or even as a non-resident importer. You can set yourself up with a customs number and name yourself as the importer of record under more circumstances there, additional requirements, but that is a possibility for you to consolidate everything into a single entry on a cost of goods or a lower value for customs than what the retail price would be at checkout, and to lower the cut not only the impact of the tariffs and the duties, but also the brokerage fees. So those two things can stave off the impact to drop shipping model, but I think there is certainly going to be an impact to it. The big benefit there, of course, is Type 86 allowed all shipments to be cleared individually. So it did allow merchants to take advantage of the 800 US de minimis and clear that free of duties. But there are ways to structure that import and to mitigate the impact of the tariffs. But there is certainly going to be some impact, and that valuation is what you'll want to consider.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. There is another interesting question here that I want to maybe see if we can answer live. Is there any guidance on the legalities around adding tariffs as a line item at checkout? I've heard of some brands considering that this, but their legal teams push back on it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's how you structure it. The big thing is you want to make sure that you're not calling something a tariff when it's actually a fee or a customs clearance fee or some other something that is not actually a tariff. So if you are going to list the duties, then it needs to be specifically that it is the duties that are applying. Integrators have gotten in some trouble in other markets around this when you lump everything into something that you're calling a duty and a tax, but it actually includes customs clearance fees or a fee that the carrier is charging on top of the duties. So the biggest thing to be aware of is that it is just the pure duty rate that you are collecting and remitting, and it doesn't include other elements like a cost or a customs clearance fee. And if it does, then that needs to be very explicit and explain to the consumer that what you are paying includes these items.
So the key here is to be very descriptive in what that additional line item means, and potentially add some additional language in somewhere that explains what is.
Yes, and this really is unique too. That this is something the U.S. really hasn't had to deal with until now. Other markets, it is very common to either include duties and fees and taxes into the product price and to make the consumer aware at checkout that your total price includes everything here, or to show these as line items where you have a price and a duty and even a tax in other markets. That when you do that, it is, as we're saying, the important thing here is to make sure that there are no other elements in there where you're claiming it's a duty, but it's actually a customs clearance fee or an
Correct.
additional charge.
Yeah, since we're going and answer some of the questions, maybe we should just tackle a few more that are related to this topic, or you want to wait until the end?
Yeah, absolutely. And an easy one, yes, the slides will be emailed after
Yeah.
this, along with some further details and some links that will be helpful for you to utilize. And it's yeah, some really good questions here. Do we think the de minimis ending on May 2nd for China and Hong Kong, do we think that's going to get pushed back even further? I don't think so. The Secretary of Commerce has declared that adequate systems are in place to collect duties on goods from China and Hong Kong. So I don't see a way to backtrack at this point. The date has been set, so it would be very difficult for anything other than this to go forward on May 2nd.
Here's another one. When I calculated duties for my products, how can I make sure I'm not missing any of the tariffs added since 2017?
Yeah, that is a good question. We'll put a link in there for the 301 tariffs are the big ones. These apply to a lot of goods from China, and it is easy to search and make sure that it is whether your products are there. But one thing we'll talk about is starting with what your HS codes are, what your commodity classification is, and to make sure that is accurate. That is really the starting point here. And once you have that and you've chosen the right HS code that is compliant, but also one that is optimal. You're making sure that you're using the best HS code available, but also the one that gives you the optimal duty rate. So with that, yeah, that it's a number of things. The first is the 301 tariffs and whether they apply. There was a question about even in the HTS US. That is going to be updated. So by the time these take effect, we expect that the HTS US will be updated to include these additional tariffs. Now, as you saw in that example, there's really only 2 columns there, so it makes it a little challenging for this to be implemented in that way. There's not a column for a reciprocal tariff, but that is one of the options that has been placed on the table. So we'll see what that looks like when it is updated. We do expect that the HTS US, the order has already gone out for that to be updated. So do expect that to include the reciprocal tariffs and the additional tariffs.
And I think it's important here to mention that what you just described in the previous slide, where these additional tariffs are basically stackable. So the HTS US will still be applicable to your commodity type. And then on top of that, there will be this additional tariff, which if it's 34 from China plus the other 20, plus assuming that the product is no longer eligible for de minimis, depending on the HTS code coming from China. So you'll have to add all those things. Typically, the duty calculator that you use at checkout on your website, and obviously we have one, should be providing and updated with all these new tariffs as they come online.
Okay, very good. Another great question about valuation, but I'm going to let you speak to the next slide before we speak about that, because it is relevant to that question.
Yeah. So continuing with some of the strategies that you can follow, as Tom alluded to, is ensuring accuracy in your catalog when it comes to the country of origin, as well as the HTS classifications. And this may require, obviously, tough conversations with your sourcing teams in order to determine if you where your product is being produced and the material that is being used. Changing that, if you are in the position to do it, takes years for sure. So, but doing the analysis, I think it's a good starting point to understand if there are opportunities for your catalog and your inventory to be optimized from a duty standpoint, right? So again, here is where working with trade lawyers and brokers can help you. We have some expertise in this area, so feel free to reach out. But again, with these new duty rates, the situation is very fluid. The second one in this list is, I think there was a question about it, is again, shifting to in-country fulfillment, which is moving your inventory, in this case, potentially to the US. And the benefit here is that you will be moving unsold inventory to a local warehouse or 3PL. And when you clear those goods, they clear at a lower valuation, of course, because that's a product that hasn't been sold. And then there is some benefit in that respect. And also you have the product closer to your customer. This is if obviously you are importing into the US. There may be opportunities to do that, through our new acquisition of Brand Access, we will be providing some of those services, and I'll let Tom speak more about it, in country fulfillment for your inventory outside of the US. And obviously this will be determined as we hear from other markets and other countries on what are the new duties that they may implement based on what we heard yesterday. And then the third one, this is an interesting one, of course. I forget the exact number, but apparently there are billions of dollars left on the table by US exporters on their what's called drawbacks. Because it's a complex process, you need to apply for a privilege license from CBP that may take a couple of months, and then obviously the filing of all these duties require having you access to all your import data as well as your export data. And typically how this works is that you only have to pay duties once. So if you're already bringing product to the US and pay US duties, if you export that product, you're able to claim that duty back from the US government, because your consumer is going to subsequently pay duties in the destination market where the product will be consumed, right? So this is a very powerful tool. I think there is some discussion about if it's eligible for some of these additional duties. I believe the ones that were presented yesterday, there was no mention. So we believe that they are eligible. I'll let Tom, maybe if you have additional information here, but some of the initial duties that were presented for Mexico and Canada were not eligible, but the ones presented yesterday, do we have information on that, Tom?
Well, even the 20% for China that was implemented earlier this year is not eligible for drawback. So the standard tariff and even the 301 tariff is still eligible, but the the additional tariff of that 20% was not. We are still waiting on customs to publish the guidance there on how it will be executed for the reciprocal tariffs.
Yeah. Some interesting questions here. How is Passport helping brands with all this? Do you offer in-country fulfillment options and help with things like pricing strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is something worth considering because as we see that the typical model of importing into the US and holding inventory here and then exporting to the rest of the world may not be viable for some merchants moving forward, and forward stocking inventory in Canada, UK, Europe, Australia, key markets, and fulfilling from there, moving that inventory directly from the manufacturer, the origin, to those destinations can avoid the US duties, of course, but also there could be, as we expect, more trade agreements between China and these other markets, that it could be beneficial, and it could actually reduce the rate of duty by shipping directly from the manufacturer or the supplier to those markets and fulfilling locally.
Right. Yeah, there was another question here. Can we elaborate on when duties will be charged on retail versus manufacturer costs? Which I think we sort of answered already. When you move product into the in-country fulfillment center, you then can claim on your cost of goods or your manufacturer cost, because this is unsold inventory, right, Tom?
That's right. That is the one use case that is bulletproof. If you are moving unsold inventory, and it doesn't really matter the market, the rules are going to be the same. It's the value for customs is what you paid the manufacturer or the supplier for it. So that is what you would use is the cost of goods for the value for customs. Now, depending on the market, then it gets more complex. We have seen providers encourage brands to use a B2C model and just claim cost of goods on items that are really going directly to a consumer just through a consolidated entry. And that's a little challenging because the rules in UK and Europe, for example, are very specific. In 2016, they moved away from the first sale and implemented the last sale. So that means if it has been sold to a consumer in UK or Europe, there's really no way for you to claim cost of goods as you enter those products, at least legally. So it's a big risk trying to set that up where you would be moving goods into those markets under a valuation that is different than what the consumer paid. As if it does get stopped at customs, that's what they're going to ask for, is the sales receipt, the money's price paid, which is essentially a credit card transaction that shows what the consumer actually paid. And when those don't match up, it's fairly easy for the customs agency to audit that and to take action on it. And valuation is probably the single biggest item on their mind right now. Every customs agency is really focused on valuation and making sure that the value declared for customs is the proper valuation. And the rules of valuation are very specific, and they're the World Customs Organization, every country that's a signatory to that abides by these rules. So they are established, but they are complex. So that is where beyond working with your carrier, you may hear that you can claim something lower than retail price, and yes, you can, but you can also cheat on your taxes, and that's pretty much how the customs agency is going to view it, is that this is duty and tax evasion if you are using something that's not compliant. So definitely worth evaluating and making sure that the method that you go with is compliant. Definitely I've seen this firsthand, even in the European market. UPS having to litigate 9-figure fines and penalties just for one brand in one country. So it really can be a significant penalty and impact, and beyond just the fees that they can assess, they can bring criminal charges. So you never want to put yourself in that situation when you know it's not going to hold up to an audit.
So as far as we know, the first sale valuation can only be applicable into the US, but not necessarily into other markets like EU or even Canada
Even
or
Canada,
Australia.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
Canada is issuing guidance in 2026 to remove any doubt here, but in their mind, there is no doubt that if the inventory has been sold, that's a different valuation method. But if you are moving inventory to Canada that is unsold and you're going to hold it in a warehouse or a 3PL there for fulfillment, that's a different thing, right? That is absolutely
right.
allowed to clear on a cost of goods, a lower valuation.
Great. All right. We'll fill more questions as okay, Tom, you want to cover this where people can get the latest updates?
Yeah, Trump Trade Tracker, we're keeping that up to date and sorting through the many news sources and X posts and social media posts that are coming through and providing you with the best, most relevant sources of information there. There's also a number of links and resources for you to take a look at. It has a table of the impact of the tariffs and what has been proposed and what is still pending. Right? We're waiting on countries to react to this and see what they come up with for their own retaliatory tariffs. We know Canada already imposed the 25% tariff on a number of US products, but only about 1,800 specific HS codes. And there's another 4,500 codes that they have in their back pocket that they're going to roll out here, we expect shortly, that would be impacted and also subject to that 25% tariff. European Union, same thing. They have a trade policy in already ready to go. It's just a matter of when they're going to announce it and what the specific number is going to be. But we certainly expect that retaliatory tariffs are going to come and impact anything that is made in the US. And we should point out, because this is one question that we see brands struggle with, and that is what does country of origin really mean? And it doesn't have anything to do with where the product is shipped. It can be shipped from anywhere, but it relates to where it's made, where it's manufactured, where it's sourced. There are specific rules around what that means. If you have components that are from various countries, then what percent goes into it and what can I claim as the final the country of origin. But a lot less to do with where the product is shipping from and everything to do with where it's actually manufactured or sourced or produced.
Yeah, that's correct. One question just came in, which I think is we haven't touched. Can I turn my US warehouse into a bonded warehouse in order to delay paying tariffs until goods are sold and shipped? I mean, you certainly can. There are, of course, some specific procedures you need to take, and you need to work with your 3PL to make sure that even the location of where that warehouse is eligible for bonded operations. And even physically, the plate has to be structured in a way to allow for the inventory to be housed without having to clear customs. The thing I know about this, and I obviously some 3PLs are offering this as a solution, is the challenge of getting if you're processing e-commerce orders out of that facility. It all depends. Obviously, if you have a mix, a wholesale or retail operation, that may work better. And yes, you will delay your tariffs and your taxes as the product come into the location, but you have to consider getting the product out and then fulfilling it and shipping it to your end consumer might be impacted because it has to clear customs, right? That order, that e-commerce order that your customer placed, that it's located right now in a bonded area of your warehouse, has to basically get removed from that location, clear US customs, pay the appropriate duties, and then ship to the end consumer. So you will be adding some time there in the fulfillment process. So you have to consider that as you make these choices. And of course, the application for bonded warehouse, it's a lengthy process, but it's something for sure worth considering.
Yeah, and one big benefit here, and it really only works for very large merchants, because the benefit of a free or foreign trade zone or a bonded warehouse is that you can bring all the inventory out into one consolidated customs entry, and that reduces the merchandise processing fee, which is a different fee altogether. In addition to the duties, it's a percent of the value of the shipment. There's a minimum fee of about $32 per entry, and a maximum fee of about $635 per entry. So if you can cap that merchandise processing fee by withdrawing thousands of items in one shot, then you're not paying the minimum every time, but you're just paying that maximum $635. And it can be a big benefit. Usually this only works at scale, though, where you have a very large operation, or you have a drop, and you're announcing a new product where you have tens of thousands of units that are going to be put into the market at the same time.
Great. I think we are done. Is there any additional questions?
So I saw someone had a hand up. I'm not sure if you want to. You're able to speak or type the answer or the question into the Q&A. But, might not be able to give you access to speak live, though, if you're able to type it into the question. And yes, we are going to send out the recording and the deck, as well as a summary and some links that I think will be helpful to have on hand.
One more question. If we're using Passport for duty and tax at checkout, will customer be 100% cover, or will they potentially be hit with additional duty and taxes plus purchase? This is the DDP versus DDU question.
Yeah, and it's a good one. So the way our duty and tax calculator works is that we are surfacing to the end consumer in that DDP model the total fee, so everything that would be paid, and there would be no further fee to the consumer on delivery. The DDU model, of course, is where also called a bill receiver, where that duty and tax and customs clearance fee is being collected from the consumer themselves. But DDP does take that risk out of it, and ensures that what the consumer pays at checkout is all they're going to pay. There's no additional surprise fees on delivery.
Yeah. So the calculator that Passport provides will be including these additional duty rates as they come online. If we have go ahead.
Well, I was going to let you say that. I know that you have a lot of experience with the MX model and warehousing both in Mexico and Canada. And this is something we haven't talked about, but I think it is worth pointing out, because there's a major impact here to that model.
Yeah, the question is, if we have inventory with country of origin China, currently in Mexico or Canada, do you recommend transferring it to the US warehouse before it gets sold? I think, and again, this is where before coming to Passport, I was operating a 3-to-1 warehouse, in this case out of Canada. This is where you have to evaluate the percent of your inventory that is in these locations, that is China, versus other countries that are still eligible for the minimus. If you have a large percent of China origin, of course, you should consider relocation to the US. If your percent is small, you may want to hold off. Although decisions to move warehouses are not trivial, and typically you have to do an RFP and interview different providers, and the actual transfer of inventory from either Mexico or Canada to the US, and then the shifting of your supply chain through your forwarder from manufacturer to the new warehouse, those obviously take time. So as we said at the beginning of the call, it's still not very clear when will de minimis go away for other origins, but apparently it will as soon as the systems are in place. You could speculate that this may take months or more, but I would advise to start looking at options on which providers can help you. Sometimes your 321 3PL in Canada or Mexico may have already established operations in the US, but consider that for sure, and do your due diligence and do your analysis.
Yeah, it's definitely easier if you have a smaller SKU count and a
Right.
smaller number of unique products. Now, holding inventory in multiple locations when you have hundreds of thousands of unique products becomes more challenging, and that can actually add to your costs. So it is definitely a cost benefit analysis to run. But the MX program was really powerful and a great tool for many merchants where they could bring inventory into Mexico in bonds, so you didn't pay US duties, you didn't pay Mexican duties, and it sat in a Mexican warehouse until the US consumer made the purchase. And then it was imported into the US under 321. But as we know, May 2nd, that goes away. So there's a limited time before that model becomes much less appealing. And the other thing that changed is December 19th, the government of Mexico made some major changes to the MX program. They largely killed it for finished products, but then slowly brought it back under certain circumstances for certain 3PLs. So it's out there. It's something worth considering. It still may be a benefit to you. Cost wise, of course, inventorying in Mexico is lower than warehousing in the US, but that is a trade off when you have to consider what the total duty rate is going to be for your products. 79% is a big number, and that was just one example. It can get worse from there.
Yeah, and I mean, and your cost benefit analysis, you got to look at, are you able to operate out of more than one warehouse as you do the transition? If you make the decision to move to the US, and then you start bringing your China origin product first into the US location while you keep fulfilling from Canada or Mexico and try to deplete that inventory as much as possible. And then eventually, when the de minimis goes completely away, then you can shift your supply chain to start warehousing totally in the US. So that way is more gradual. Okay, again, obviously operating more than one warehouse and the fixed cost that entails impacts your cost of goods. So those are things that everybody had to individually evaluate.
Okay, good question here about some of the hardest hit industries, and in relation to the retaliatory tariffs or the cumulative tariffs on products of China. It's largely across the board now. There's no escaping the 34% or the additional 20% implemented this year. The question is whether that the 301 tariffs apply, and they do apply to most apparel. So that is one of the hardest hit industries for sure, is apparel manufactured in China. And not only from the tariff standpoint, but also from the increase in scrutiny over sourcing and forced labor, which has really cranked up. And RC, I know you know this very well, working for an apparel merchant, but being aware of your full supply chain and where those suppliers are sourcing and how they're producing the materials, and that they are not subject to the forced labor implication.
Yeah, I will echo that. I think apparel is one that is hard hit by this new tariffs, especially if you produce. Because what happened is that during the first Trump administration, with the 301 tariff, people start moving their production to other markets, not in China, the Southeast Asia. But now we see the tariffs coming out of countries like Vietnam. So even once the de minimis goes away, if you're producing out of Vietnam, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be ugly, right? So unfortunately, these are decisions that take time to implement as you shift your supply chain. But we'll see. I think there is still discussion of some government officials of Vietnam coming to the U.S. in the next couple of days, and there's still there's going to be negotiations happening. So we have to be close to all these changes, and again, we're here to support.
All right. Another good question here about if you do fulfill from Mexico, when de minimis goes away on May 2nd, what's that mean? Who's responsible for paying the duties? And this is something we didn't press down on, but it is important to mention. In that 3-day period where the de minimis did go away for goods from China and Hong Kong, if it was not shipped on DDP terms, if it was not accounted for, and it was up to the receiver to pay the duties, that was a big impact, because it meant it often had to go through a formal entry process, and the broker or the carrier would hold the package, actually reach out to the consumer, and they'd have to collect their social security number, their tax ID, which is never a popular thing to ask a consumer to give you their social security number over the phone. So there was a good bit of chaos there, as carriers and brokers struggled to get goods cleared and to try to collect that information from the consumer, even the power of attorney, so they could clear the goods on the consumer's behalf. So definitely a better model to account for those duties as a DDP shipment, where the shipper is accounting for the duties and not the consumer. And as Augustine was mentioning earlier, the ability to consolidate all those entries, all those shipments into a single customs entry with one importer of record who does account for the duties, it streamlines the clearance. It reduces the customs clearance fee that the broker will charge, and it can give you the ability to claim a lower valuation than what the consumer paid.
Does the baseline of 10% duty apply to every country plus the duties mentioned from by country, like India? I think you already covered this, but yes, that's right, right? Is it 10% plus whatever additional tariff by market?
Well, yeah, I think it's the question is whether it's either or, and there are about 60 countries that are on that specific retaliatory tariff list, reciprocal tariff list, and for those countries, India is one of them. Whatever that rate is the rate you would apply. So it's either the 10% baseline if the country is not listed in that what's called the Annex 1, or it's the specific reciprocal rate. So EU, for example, 20%. You would only pay the 20% and not the 20 plus the 10. But if it's from a country that is not singled out in that reciprocal tariff list, then it is just the baseline 10%.
Right. Correct. Yes. So that's the way it is. All right. Maybe we have time for one last question. Will passport tax calculator in Shopify be updated in real time with these official new rates when they take effect?
Yes, yeah, we are working hard to keep that up to date as the changes come in, not only for as we see the retaliatory tariffs that we expect other countries to implement. Most of them are specific at the HS8 level. Of course, the HS code, the first 6 digits are universal, and then beyond that, you get specific for each country. We've seen most countries implement the tariffs at the HS8 or beyond level. So we've been using that to update the calculator and make sure that it does account for any additional tariffs or duties that would be assessed.
All right. Great. So thank you very much, Tom. You want to close us out?
Yeah, appreciate the attendance. Some great questions here. I know this is an area of concern, and we are staying on top of it and trying to push as much content out as possible. But always happy to be a resource for you here. We have a team of trade specialists and licensed customs brokers and industry experts like Augustine who have actually done this, and it is nice to have someone who not only has seen it but has the connections. This is where leaning on customs brokers and trade attorneys and even trade associations is very important to get the best information. We're trying to collate all that information into the Trump Trade Tracker and make that available to you. But
Yeah.
let's,
Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you, everyone. And as Tom mentioned, please feel free to reach out. We're going to be distributing the presentation with our contact information, and happy to answer any questions you may have as the situation develops, and be here for to assist you and your brands as you embark in this journey. It's, of course, been an interesting couple of months, and we're here to support you guys.
Absolutely. Okay, more to come.
Right.
Thanks for attending, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.